the means we have and the facilities and possibilities we have to give protection to election observers, to give protection to polling stations, I say again, as a sort of third circle after the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police. It's an important litmus test, in other words, and during my visit to Afghanistan, my farewell visit 2 weeks ago, I also told President and candidate Karzai, because he's President and candidate at the same time at the moment, he's double-headed, he's a double-headed friend, as I call him. It's very important that the Afghan government does everything they can to make these elections credible. I think it's a very important test.
We've heard allegations that the government of Hamid Karzai is corrupt and incompetent. Do you believe that to be true?
Well, I've said publicly, and I can repeat it in front of your camera and to your audience, that I do think that the record in promoting good governance, the record in fighting corruption in Afghanistan could have been a better one. And if quite rightly the Afghans ask things from the international community, we are more than entitled to ask from the new Afghan government, from the new Afghan president and the government, to do more in the fight against corruption, to do more in promoting the rule of law, to avoid incidents where universal values come under pressure. I refer to the so-called Sharia law. I refer to the horrible sentence of the boy who downloaded a text from the internet. I mean, your soldiers, your Aussie soldiers, the Dutch soldiers, the Canadians, the Brits, the Americans are there to defend universal values. We do that in full respect for the Islamic values in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Let there be no misunderstanding about that. We have to fully respect those values. When we do not respect Afghanistan's history, its culture, its geography and its religion, we'll fail. On the other hand, there are universal values on which we cannot compromise and who are the basis for our presence there. So, in brief, yes, I expect, and we should expect, more from the new president and the new government in the fight against corruption, in promotion of the rule of law, and in promotion of good governance, indeed.
This war in Afghanistan is now almost 8 years old. The insurgency's the worst it's been since the overthrow of the Taliban in 2001. Why is that?
Well, I think over the past period we have learned, and I think President Obama has played a very important role in this regard, that you cannot see Afghanistan in isolation. The insurgency in Afghanistan and the ones who want to destroy Afghan society, ours as well, by the way, yours and ours as well, given the global terrorist threat, we cannot see Afghanistan in isolation. And that's the reason that you see Pakistan as an important player. We in NATO, we try to deepen our relations with Pakistan. You see the Americans with a lot of focus on Pakistan. You see the Pakistani government now acting against extremists in many parts of the country. In other words, is it worse than it was? Yes and no. Large parts of Afghanistan see relative, I underline the word relative 3 times, stability and security. The challenges in the southern parts and in the east are still huge. I agree that suicide attacks are up, that improvised explosive devices are up. Asymmetric tactics, as we call it, the Taliban and the enemies of Afghanistan used to kill as many innocent Afghan civilians, by the way. We discussed civilian casualties. They are the one who intentionally kill huge groups of innocent Afghan civilians. They are the ones who spray acid in the eyes of young girls for the simple reason that they go to school. So we see a lot of progress. We also see an uptick in violence. We are not there yet. Let's not fool ourselves, I say again. The challenges are still huge, but we're making progress, and we should be ready for those challenges in the years to come.
You mentioned Pakistan and alluded to the US conducting stealth raids over the border into that country to try to dismantle al-Qaeda and Taliban networks there. Does NATO support those actions?
NATO's mandate, which is a Security Council United Nations approved mandate, is strictly limited to Afghanistan. So NATO can never physically or militarily support those actions. We support them politically because we think it's important, as we see the Pakistani government do now, that action is being taken against those same extremists operating in Pakistan as they are operating in Afghanistan. But our mandate is strictly limited to Afghanistan. What we've learned in the near past, and we've seen conferences in the framework of the G8 organized by Italy, we've seen a conference in France, we've seen a very important conference in The Hague in the Netherlands. We are trying to involve all the neighbors of Afghanistan and other important players like Russia, like China, like Iran, in really addressing this problem as a regional one, and I think that's what it is. But no NATO action across the borders of Afghanistan, under no circumstance.
You stepped down from the role as NATO Secretary General in August after 5.5 years in the job. How long do you believe foreign troops will remain there? Is there an exit strategy?
Well, that's a difficult one. My answer is always, and that's what I'm going to give to your Australian audience as well, we'll have to stay there for the foreseeable future. The more successful we are, militarily that is, I mean, reconstruction and development will go on for generations. But I'm speaking as a NATO Secretary General. For the foreseeable future, a foreign military presence will be necessary. I'm quite sure and convinced about that. The more successful we are in training and equipping the Afghan National Army, the more successful the international community is in training and equipping the Afghan National Police, and the sooner they can do what a police force or an army does in and for Australia, the earlier the moment will come that we can start discussing reducing our presence. That moment has not come. We are increasing our military presence. We see an American surge. I hope that all other allies will follow suit. We see a beefing up of our forces, including Aussie forces, by the way. And I commend Australia and the Australian government for that once again. We see a beefing up temporarily of the forces for the elections. But a military presence will be needed for the foreseeable future. And then I'm not talking months, but I'm talking years.
But will the populations of contributing NATO nations have the stomach for that sort of open-ended involvement?
Well, that's a good one again. There's certainly no stomach if I would say we'll be there forever, we're going to be there for decades, because public opinion is critical in many of the troop contributing nations. That public opinion should realize, however, and Australia has dramatic experience with terrorism, as we all know, that the security of Afghanistan is inextricably and closely linked to the security of the individual citizen in Australia or in the Netherlands, Belgium or Canada. That is not an easy notion to explain. I do agree, and I think that you're right if you're asking me basically, is there a window open and will that window close at a certain stage? I hope not, but where we have to do a better job in communications, and I'm also looking at myself here as Secretary General, is getting across the message that this security is inextricably linked to our security, and that terrorism is a global phenomenon, and that Afghanistan was a breeding ground, a training camp for terrorists, and that it will become a breeding ground and a training camp again if we fail. So failure is not an option. We'll have to stay there for the foreseeable future, and I'm quite sure that my successor, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, will, like I've tried to do over the past 5.5 years, try to get that message across.
Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, thank you very much for joining us.